I'm an associate professor of education and teacher education at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. This is like my 11th year there. So before that, I spent 10 years in the classroom in a lot of different roles, including as a teacher, instructional coach, a curriculum writer, a department chair, did all kinds of cool stuff. So I say that because, and we'll allude to this maybe a little bit throughout the presentation, in our work that we've done with lesson planning with purpose, we really try to maintain that teacher lens and really, dig into our history in the past in schools and even now currently still being in schools. So to have that practitioner's lens to go along with the theoretical kind of concepts that help drive the book.
Awesome. I love it. So you're coming at it from like the theory's great, but here's how you actually put it into action in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of it's called a praxis approach, right? So where does theory and practice meet, right? So that is very much what we do. And in that theory piece empowers teachers to say, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then, certainly if you can't apply it, then it really doesn't help you so much. So that's, we'll definitely be talking about that application piece today.
Great. Christy, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Christy McConnell, and I'm a professor of educational foundations and curriculum studies at the University of Northern Colorado. This is my 10th year there, which I just realized recently, which seems unbelievable. Before that, I've also been at other universities as well, and taught high school English for 7 years as department coordinator, and have done other things as well in education. I'm a writing coach and that kind of thing. I like to write poetry, something that's not academic about me. I'm really excited to be here. Writing this book with Brad and with Bruce was a dream of mine, and we've been working towards these ideas for our collective careers. So together we've been sharing ideas and presenting nationally and writing various papers before it all sort of came together. And what we hope, as Brad mentioned, is bringing together theory and practice so that teachers actually enjoy lesson planning and and that it's actually a fulfilling, creative, meaningful experience for them, which in turn creates meaningful experiences for their students in the classroom. So I'm really excited to be here. Happy to be here with Brad, happy to be here with you and with our audience. And I want to say to all of the teacher candidates out there and new teachers, we support you, we love you, we're here for you. And the times that will be difficult, there are great rewards. So hang in there.
Great advice. Yeah, I think teachers right now teaching post-pandemic or what have you are feeling like in a fight or flight mode, right? It's like, who has time for lesson planning when I'm in the classroom trying to put out fires all day and dealing with situations that I never thought I would deal with. So tell us why we should be intentional in lesson planning, and despite everything going on, why lesson planning really matters.
I
Go ahead, Brad. Yeah,
I love that question. So yeah, obviously you can imagine the title of the book's very purposeful. Teaching with intention is empowered teaching in so many different ways, right? So when you teach with intention, you know where you have a plan. You are doing things with purpose, right? So you're not just, what are we going to do today? I don't know. I like elephants. Let's talk about elephants today, right? And that happens. It happens. But instead, we are very thoughtful in the curriculums that we're choosing and the pedagogical approaches that we're taking in our aims. And certainly, we're not trying to say that it's prescriptive, because that's just not realistic, right? Like, we had the best intentions, right? You've heard that old adage, the best laid plans. But so it leaves space for, the organic nature of what may come up in the classroom. That's really kind of where the magic happens. But to be really purposeful in what it is that we're doing is important. Now, why is it important to be intentional? My answer would be, and certainly Christy might have a different answer, it engages students. It enlivens the experience. And we're going to use that word a lot, experience, because I definitely can speak for Christy because we've had millions of conversations on this. Experience is really important in the classroom. And we really think it's, it's sort of taken a back seat over the years in many ways to outcomes and, a measurable objective, which have value, certainly, but they're not the end all be all. And we're trying to remind everybody that experience piece kind of matters a lot. So that's been a big, when you're writing lesson plans, that piece is really important. And then as Chrissy alluded to, it's not supposed to be this painful experience for teachers. It could actually be an enlivening and enjoyable experience, as crazy as that might sound. And we can definitely say firsthand and from doing many, many workshops that teachers have actually found that to be the case, that it's fun, that it's, when you look at it as an artist who's got with a palette and a blank canvas or even a partially blank canvas, it can really, magical things can happen, and it can really bring the experience for teachers to life as well.
Awesome. Well, we're excited for your presentation today, talking about all ways that we can build that lens into our planning. So Brad, I know you have a presentation for us. You want to get that ready? And educators,
absolutely,
let's do this. Class has begun.
Oh, I like that. That's nice.
Lesson planning with purpose.
So here comes our slides. Christy, are you good there, or?
Yes,
We're good?
I am. I'm doing great. And I've got the slides here. So what are we ready to go?
We're ready to go.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone. We are excited to share some thoughts with you about lesson planning with purpose. And then also we thought today we would focus on, and now I've lost you guys, we would focus on integrated social emotional learning. And why integrated social emotional learning, we'll go into that more in a moment. But we're seeing both teachers and students really feeling that need right now as we try to emerge from this pandemic. We all need some attention to our well-being, and we can do that in the classroom through our lesson planning. It doesn't even have to be an add-on. It can be we can teach content through SEL skills and ideas. So we're going to focus on that today. But we're going to start broadly. What we would typically do, and Brad, thank you. I have no idea how to move these slides. So Brad and I are going to rely on each other's intuition about when it's time to go. Normally what we would do is we would have everyone go to this website here and fill out a quick survey. So I'm going to read you the questions, and you can just do them in your mind, and then we'll share some findings later. But what we would invite you to do is consider. I'm going to read you 4 statements, and think about which of those are true for you most of the time. So in your mind, just think how many of these 4 are true for you most of the time. I am receptive and amenable to new ideas, situations, and people. If that's true for you, maybe hold up a finger for yourself. I understand and reflect upon my own values, culture, beliefs, and practices. Number 3, I create safe spaces for learning, whether in the classroom or virtual environment. And 4th, I am present and genuine in my interactions. So thinking of those 4, which of the 4, or how many of those 4 are true for you most of the time? And then think about which one you'd really like to kind of keep in your mind today as we move forward. So I'll read them one more time. Choose one to think about as we're going through examples today. So again, I am receptive and amenable to new ideas, situations, and people. I understand and reflect upon my own values, culture, beliefs, and practices. I create safe spaces for learning, whether in the classroom or virtual environment. And 4th, I am present and genuine in my interactions. So again, we just invite you to hold on to one of those as we go through our talk today. So how will we spend our time together? We're going to talk about our book. So here's my little written up, marked up copy. Lesson Planning with Purpose, 5 Approaches to Curriculum Design. It came out in 2020. Am I allowed to give us a plug here? Is that okay? We just received the Outstanding Book Award from the American Association for Teaching and Curriculum. So we're really proud of that. So we tell you that so you know that, at least one other person or a group of people think our book is worth some time. So we're happy to share it with you today. So in this book, we talk about 5 different approaches. And we talk about the behaviorist, the constructivist, the aesthetic, the ecological, and the integrated social emotional. And the reason we give you 5 approaches, and we invite you to explore them through our website or through the book, you don't have to buy the book, but we'd love it if you would, is that when you take into consideration your students, the context in which you're teaching, the curriculum itself, and what we don't want you to forget, who you are as a teacher and as a human being, each of those approaches can have benefits and drawbacks. And so sometimes you just want to teach, you need to teach skills, right? We need to teach skills. Like one of my favorite things to teach is the comma rules. I love to teach the comma rules. Do you know how many comma rules there are? I wish someone could chime in and tell me and I could give them extra credit. I know how many there are, not as many as you might think. But sometimes we just need to teach comma rules, and behaviorism is a great way to do that. Sometimes we want students to build meaning on their own and to really have these meaning-making experiences, and that might be a constructivist approach. An aesthetic approach is sensory-rich, where we really want students to be in the moment using their senses and experiencing something, even if it's like the textures of science equipment and lab equipment. And then an ecological approach is looking at the relationship between the community and students. And the community can be human and more than human, can be the planet. It's about all sorts of ways that we're connected. And then the integrated social emotional approach really helps us see how we can infuse content and social emotional skills together into a lesson. So that's the big picture of our book. And today we're going to talk about something that sounds really simple, beginnings, middles, and ends. We're also going to talk about perceptive teaching and how that can support your well-being. And then finally, we'll dive into the ISIL approach. So to get back to that first question, thank you for that. How might we teach with intention? Am I on the right slide? Yes, we are.
You're on it.
See, we're doing, yes, we've got this. So how might we teach with intention? Well, we would offer 3 big ideas here: a well-designed curriculum, a perceptive teacher, and multiple lesson plan approaches. So what we're suggesting is that to make lesson planning meaningful for teachers and for students, we need all of these things at play. So what is then lesson planning with purpose? It's really about the experiences of the student and of the teacher coming together alongside content to create rich experiences for everyone. And to do this, the teacher really has to see themselves as a curriculum designer. So what does that mean to be a curriculum designer? I've already talked through the 5 approaches to curriculum design. Whoops. I think I missed, Brad and I, did I miss a slide?
No, you're
I've already talked through, okay, the different approaches to curriculum design. And I've also mentioned when we might want to do that. So as a quick review, this chart will help you see behaviorism is for skill development, constructivism is about individualized meaning making, the aesthetic is sensory rich, the ecological is about real world relevance, say that 5 times fast, and really about interconnection. And then finally, the ISIL model is about relationship building and holistic development. So once you have a sense that, number one, you have options. Not all lesson plans have to look the same. Not all lesson plans have to start with an instructional objective. That's a secret. You might not be able to share that with others, but that's a little insider secret from us that you don't always have to start with an instructional objective. You can start by building the experience from the inside out. So that's what we consider to be a well-designed curriculum. I'm sorry, there we go. I'm still learning how to move all these things around over here. So what is a well-designed curriculum? It's an experience that can mediate many concerns of novice teachers. So raise your hand. I can't see you, but raise your hand if you're a novice teacher or a teacher candidate and you're nervous about classroom management. And we often offer classes on classroom management and how to set up policies and how to set norms. And those are all really important things. Seating charts, all of these things can be very helpful. We suggest that a well-designed curriculum is classroom management's best friend. You no longer have to manage the classroom because what you're doing is engaging students in experiences. And it's a different paradigm for thinking about your teaching. And when you can be in relation with your students and experiencing these things with them alongside of them, you no longer need to be a manager, you get to be a teacher. And we also, let's go to the next slide. We want to focus on this idea. And again, it's a simple one, but if you take away one thing from today, this is something that I would really invite you to think about. A well-designed curriculum has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Again, simple concept, right? But how often have you seen teachers where kids are streaming in and the teacher's sort of sitting behind their desk or grading papers in the period before or working on notes, and the bell rings and class doesn't start and everyone's kind of shuffling around? We've lost one of the most important moments of teaching, and that is a strong beginning. Really being intentional about knowing who your learners are walking in that door, what signals you're going to give that the lesson is beginning and you are ready to go, and how you will entice them into the learning. And we give a lot of different examples depending on the lesson plan approach you're going to use, but you can do things where students know what to do when they come in the classroom, or you can provide an experience. It's sort of a surprise of an experience to them right when they walk in. Whatever that is, having a strong beginning to each class might feel like a lot of work and overwhelming to plan, but it will pay off in spades. Then in the middle, rather than saying, how can I have students meet my instructional objective, we invite you to ask the question, what kinds of experiences can I orchestrate for and with students, for them and with them? How do we give students a meaningful virtual experience if many of you are teaching virtually or hybrid? So this isn't just for classroom teachers. This can work for when and if you are teaching online. But we want to think about the experience that we're offering students. And that can be a sensory experience. It can be reading something aloud. It can be working in partners. There are all sorts of ways that we can orchestrate content from the middle out. But we want to think about an experience for them. And then finally, endings. And if you think about really good movies, they end with something that allows you to know that it's over, but you're still thinking about it. So great endings bring closure to the lesson. They help students review and remember and celebrate what they learned and also preview the next day. And it helps them also, great endings help students connect the learning from that day into their lives. So again, we invite you to think about beginnings, middles, and ends of that time that you have together with your students. And we're going to give you in the book and then later today with our ISIL example, ways that can actually look, because it can be hard to plan every day. But when you get rituals and routines in place, it becomes easier and it activates your creativity. So the next thing that we want to talk about is perceptive teaching. Brad, do you want to dive in here and talk about perceptive teaching, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of tag team this one a little bit if you want to.
Yeah, let's do that.
So this notion of perceptive teaching is something that we've been working on for pretty much our entire careers, to be honest. And the perceptive teaching is a framework for us to think about how do we show up as the most effective us that we can be as teachers and frankly, even as humans. So essentially what we did is we looked at all of the research that's been written on effective teaching, on culturally responsive teaching, in the psychology literature on motivation and good teaching. And we developed this, and then we engaged in our own research to develop this framework that we call the perceptive teaching framework. So what is it? It is a means to attending to who we are as teachers, and enhances the experience of teaching while also supporting our own social and emotional well-being. It sort of helps us be the best us we can be. And it's very much, again, literature-based to say, well, if someone asks like, well, what do good teachers do? This is about as close as we've been able to get to answer that question, because that's kind of a loaded question, right? There's no one right answer, but this is as close as we think at this moment in time, we can get to answering it.
So Mark,
what is
that with Itsness? Are you saying this is kind of like your frame of mind in terms of, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
sure,
get the clarity.
Yeah, it's sort of it's really actually it's a perfect transition. So it's a frame of mind. It's comprised of sort of what are our intentions, what are our beliefs, and then what are our actions within the classroom. We kind of thought of it in two different ways. Some of it is who am I, and some of it is what am I doing, right? So this is sort of what you're seeing in this slide here is that breakdown. When we're thinking about who we are, what we have found is the teachers that are thriving are those that are open-minded, open to new ideas, willing to take risks. They're the types of teachers that don't hear a new idea and immediately go, no, 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 no. They might say no, 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 but at least they're willing to listen, think about it, process it, and then make that determination. So they are definitely those people that are willing to take risks, that are going to get out of the norm of the day-to-day, so to speak. They're aware of themselves, they're aware of their students. They are reflective upon their values, their cultures, their students' values, cultures, beliefs, and practices. They kind of have that with itness, if you will, in the classroom, both towards self and student, in relation to students. They tend to be they're caring. They care for students, the whole person. Relationships are important, and they create safe spaces for learning. And then they're authentic. And I say that with a little bit of a caveat. It's sort of authentic with a filter, right? So like I always use this sort of scenario with my students. Who I am in the classroom isn't all that different from who I am on Sunday afternoon watching the Browns game with some friends, right? Probably the language is a little bit different, hence the filtering. But I'm not a dramatically different person, right? I don't show up as some teacher guy who's completely different than who I am as a human being. And as anybody who has taught any period of time knows, students smell phoniness from a mile away. And those teachers that are inauthentic often do not thrive nearly as much as those that are authentic. So with that, then we also have the what do I do? So what do perceptive teachers do? They do what we call personalizing the experience. They look for multiple ways or pathways for students engaged with the content. They are very intentional about inviting different cultural perspectives into the classroom, culture being very broadly defined, so that the students can kind of see themselves in the learning, evaluate the learning through their own cultural lenses when appropriate and when available. They also teach the whole person. They see the student not only as a pupil, but as a human, right? And they attend to the academic, the social, and emotional growth. It's not just about content and the intellectual. They also teach with intention, as we've sort of alluded to. They are intentional about the what they're going to do based upon the needs of their and interests of their students. And then finally, they aim to develop autonomy, right? A great colleague and mentor of mine used to say, we're working ourselves out of a job. A really good teacher is always doing that. And I think that's a really fun way of saying that is kind of what developing autonomy is about. We want to help them build capacity and foster those skills and ideas and whatnot within students to help them not need us anymore, to be able to be autonomous people. So taken as a whole, that framework, if you're saying that framework sort of can lend itself to what the research bears out and our own experience and research bears out of these are sort of the qualities of really effective teachers.
I think this is phenomenal. If you just want to go back to that for a second, because,
Yeah.
myself, I observe teachers in my role as a teacher educator. And I see this so much. Like, I just watched a video the other night. It was an English teacher. She put the camera on. She's like, hey, Dr. D. And she's seeing all the kids, and she just seems really happy. She's asking them about their weekend. And then they, spend some time just chatting about like what they were doing in another class. And then she goes into the content. Everybody's like 100% present. Even though they were talking about something that I was like, wait, I'm not an ELA teacher. This is pretty complex. It was like simple and complex sentences. And even in that schema, all of those sentences that she shared, I was like, whoa, she's talking about things that are, and I hate to use the word relatable, but they were totally relatable sentences that would engage her kiddos, right? She was like, had a question that was about COVID, and she had a question about like a Netflix show, and it was things that the kids knew. So I could tell that she knew her learners. I could tell she cared about them. I could tell that she was like creating that safe space for them to learn, and she valued all of them. She even had her equity sticks and was randomly calling on them. So all of those little, you know, strategies built in all of those pieces. So I think this is a wonderful framework. If you're even struggling in the classroom right now with things like classroom management, it's like, how are you showing up and bringing these things into your practice?
Yeah, if I could add to that, you know, to your question earlier, like, is this the same thing as with itness, which is such a funny word, right? And we often hear about, oh, that teacher just has it, or the X factor, right? That's really difficult. If you're someone who's like, do I have the X factor? Like, how do I get that with itness thing? This is a way to really look at different qualities, again, as Brad is saying, that are research-based, but different ways that you can work on things, how to show up in the classroom. And so when we did that opening activity about giving you those 4 statements, you'll see that they're from this chart. And if you picked one that you want to work on and you want to think about, you can help yourself, help each other, talk to your peers, talk to your teachers about how to, or your professors about how to help build those qualities and characteristics in the classroom. So they're not, while they are intangible in many ways, they're not elusive. These are all qualities that if you want to develop, you can. There are ways that you can journal, you can reflect on your teaching, you can strive to be more caring. We can all strive to be more caring and to know that it's actually effective for making your life and your students' lives more interesting and engaging in the classroom. Hopefully would be a little bit of motivation. But I do think that when we realize that who we are matters so much about what we're doing in the classroom, I think that can be very empowering. And maybe a little scary too.
Well, and it also flips, if I could just real quick mention, it also flips on its head how we professionally develop teachers, or teachers go through professional development, how we work through the evaluation process, and at the teacher ed level, even how we work with our teacher candidates, right? And Christy and I have even, developed different tools that we're sort of been playing around with to help us be targeted in looking at these 8 qualities that, as we didn't just pull out of the air, that we know are what will help you be a really good teacher, and then use that as a lens to help teachers grow and become better. Because all of these things, as Christy was talking about, they're malleable. They're not fixed, right? You can develop your awareness, and that is not just my opinion. That is very much, and we've written about this. It's very much based in the psychology literature that these qualities, any of these human qualities, are very much malleable. So you're not fixed. You're not like, well, I'm just uncaring. It's just who I am. I came out of the womb that way. My grandmother was uncaring. I can't help it. Right?
That's my authentic self.
Here's my question: is that these things are not going to show up in a traditional lesson plan. As a teacher educator myself, I always see, okay, what's your standard? What's your measurable outcome? How does that align with your activities and your assessment? And none of those things am I even looking at that you just shared. So you just blew my head off. And I'm wondering, like, wow, how can I actually authentically evaluate and support my teacher candidates so that they are focused on these things, these values, these, qualities?
Well, we've got some great resources we're happy to share with you. That actually, again, we're in sort of the testing phase, but yeah, that's a great question that we've been seeking the answers to, and we're getting closer.
I'm so excited. This is awesome.
I would also say that a lot of this is about, first and foremost, awareness. So if these qualities, if you haven't seen these qualities together in this way before, which, this is something that we've done just in the last year, number one, it's about awareness, right? So as a teacher, seeing these qualities and knowing that who you are and what you do matters, it's not just about the measurable objective, then that's the first part. And then the next part is really paying attention, right? So just as an individual, paying attention to how I show up in the classroom as a professor, not just in K-12, right? This is just as important in our classes in higher education. And being open to feedback to oneself and from others. And so it's really about a series of questioning and it's an unfolding. It's not a checklist, right? This is not intended to say, oh, today I was caring. Like that it's good to think about those things, but we also want to think of this as on a continuum. And sometimes I'm just not open to feedback. It's like, I've had a day, right? Like I can't do the feedback thing right now, but I also know that I can do it tomorrow after I've had a good night's sleep. So just having that awareness around how we're feeling and how we're doing, I think is important. So it's a start. And I know that it's not a specific tool and it's not quote unquote measurable, but it's still useful and it's still meaningful. Hopefully.
I think so.
If it's not, then, you could take it or leave it.
So, exactly. So I think, we kind of spoke to this, but when you embrace these qualities, it can and does most often lead to reflective, evolving and culturally inclusive educational environments that are enlivening, engaging, inviting. I could go on, but these are the classrooms where when the teachers are enacting these things, and our research very much bears this out. Heck, my dissertation was on it. These are the classes where kids go, I want to go there. Even the most resistant kids. No, I'm not trying to sell you a utopian. It's not every day everything's perfect, right? But I've anecdotally, not even anecdotally, but in the research, I haven't necessarily written about this specifically. The teachers that embrace these kinds of qualities, like these are the courses that, like in the high school, like the kids, they might cut every class, but they'll go to that one, right? They might not do anything when they're there, but they're there, and that's a win, right? So again, I'm not trying to paint the picture of utopia, but this notion of perceptive teaching is very powerful. So,
and
Christy,
also a note for. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think that's an important note for secondary teachers, and I think a lot of our audience today is they will be secondary teachers, middle and high school, and a lot of times we're so focused on content that we just think about, okay, they need to learn how to do this formula or how to write an essay or whatever the thing is that we're working on. And so it's important as secondary teachers to understand that, yes, content is very important. And we are putting content right alongside the other things that are important in this planning, like who you are and who your students are and content and the experience. They all get to share equal weight. And so that's just as true in a junior level science class or an AP bio class or a calculus class as it is in a second grade, elementary school class. And it's also true for me as someone who teaches adults in higher education. I teach often, sometimes people who are older than me, if that's imaginable. And so it's not about grade level. It's not about content. I mean, I teach doctoral level classes, right? Who I am is still important, and how I work together with the experience and how I show up in those classes is just as important as the very rigorous content that we teach. So for secondary folks, I just want to make sure you know that who you are is still important, even though you've got some pretty rigorous content to teach as well.
Absolutely. So are we going to jump through over top of this inclusion XP because you kind of did talk about this already, or is there more that you wanted to add? I
don't have any more to add.
I felt like that was the case. So I'll sort of steer the ship in the direction of our focus on the integrated social emotional lesson plan, which is, we don't have enough acronyms in education. So we added a new one. It's ISIL. You're welcome. Kidding. So we want to talk about the integrated social emotional lesson planning model that's in the book today and give you an overview of it, and then a really concrete example of what that can look like for you. With the hope that like tomorrow, after you buy our book, you can go and apply this in your own classroom. You wouldn't even have to buy the book because we're going to help you out here. So the aim of this approach is unique in that obviously it's timely because we all know I won't go on and on about the serious issues that we are having with mental health across the globe. And that was pre-pandemic. It's a massive issue that is an all hands on deck situation, meaning we need a lot of help from a lot of people to help our kiddos develop socially and emotionally. So this model is unique in that it attends to students' social emotional learning alongside content. So it's not just let's do social emotional learning today, right? It's integrated. That's hence the name. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. So in addition to addressing the mental and emotional health crises, this not only attends to content, but it can help students really maximize their own academic potential by ensuring that they're completely engaged across the cognitive domain, the emotional, and the social domain, right? So we really want to fully ensconce them. And as I'll talk about in just a moment, this approach also really puts front the notion that we can use social emotional learning to help mitigate and understand and grapple with the content. We're going to show you what that looks like. So it's not just sort of an add-on. It's not like, oh my gosh, I got to do this now because I've got, we know teachers, we got a lot of curriculum to cover, right? So this isn't like an extra add-on. This is actually a support. And that's very much how we try to conceive of this particular model. So how do we make it happen? What we do is there are really 4 parts to it. Number 1 is we come up with an integrated social emotional objective. And this is sort of should have an asterisk next to it. You could also have a personalized social emotional objective for individual students that they choose themselves. So meaning we could be working on collectively a social emotional objective as a whole for a lesson, or usually over multiple lessons, right? It's not just a one-off of like, today we worked on self-regulation, but we're good now. We've done it once, right? So usually that's multiple times over. And can be done in conjunction with a whole school effort where they've adopted a social emotional curriculum across the school, and it can help support those efforts as well. But that personalized objective would allow the students, that student who might say, well, I feel like I'm pretty strong when it comes to, that sort of self-regulation piece. I'd like to work on something else. That opens the door for that opportunity. The second piece is the beginning. Going back to this notion of beginnings, middles, and ends, we have what's called an inclusion activity, and we'll talk about what that looks like, where we open the lesson. Then there's a middle that is a body with engaging practices, and again, we'll talk about what that is. And then the end, where we have what's called an optimistic closure, and we'll show you what that looks like. So where do we start? We start with the integrated social emotional objective and potentially the personalized SEL objective. So I want to kind of walk you through an example that we've come up with to kind of make this a little bit more concrete. So in the example that we're going to use with you, the academic content we're going to use, we're going to just pick something that most people have some familiarity with, is metaphors. We want to identify and analyze metaphors. That's the academic content we're really going to focus on in the classroom. And if you look at the standards, this is pretty prevalent across language arts standards. The SEL skill that we're going to focus on is effective collaboration. So again, it's not just a one-off that we do effective collaboration today and we're done with it. We've got it mastered. Of course, that's silly because we know effective collaboration is something we can work on for a lifetime. But the idea is that this is something that can persist maybe throughout a week, throughout a month. Maybe it comes in and out. You sort of spiral the curriculum, if you will. But these will be our 2 focal points. So this idea of having an integrated social emotional objective, and I'll show you what that looks like specifically. These are the key components that you'll see in that actual piece. So going just real quick before we get into the actual whole objective, we want to be very clear. It is not our intention, and it shouldn't be our intention, that teachers are expected to be mental health experts, right? That's just, I mean, you're asked to do a lot of stuff, teachers. Come on, let's be honest here. You're asked to do a lot of things. Adding this to the list is just not tenable or realistic. So the question goes, well, you're asking me to teach SEL. Well, how am I supposed to know what I'm going to cover? Well, we, through our friends at Castle, the largest organization in the world that works on social emotional learning, has competencies that we can draw upon to help us figure out what they are. So this chart that you're looking at there are 5 competencies. And they're sort of broke down into smaller pieces. And we highlight this in the book in more detail, but you have some examples here. So you've got self-management, self-awareness, relationship skills, social awareness, and then responsible decision-making. And then if you look, we'll kind of hone in just real quick on that first one, self-management. Some examples of that might look like, and aren't limited to, there are more, impulse control or self-stress management. So then the next question, looking at the third column, is the teaching tools that we might be able to use. So for example, making this a little bit more concrete, right? So for impulse control, we could do self-monitoring activities. We could have strategy checklists. And there are certainly others. For stress management, we could do things like teaching them about mindful minutes and actually doing those things. I've seen many teachers across K-12 use guided meditations and visualizations to either maybe start a lesson or to even help support students who are having some issues. So with stress management, so there's all kinds of different ways. But this is just some of the resources that teachers can use
I
when they're
love
trying to
it. So
figure out
these are
what
kind
they're
of
going
like
to
the
do.
big ideas that you can build in as a daily routine. Like, we're going to start, obviously I'm teaching math, but in the first 5 minutes, we're going to do a little bit of mindfulness. And which is kind of ironic that you brought that up, because when I was a math coach, I used to go around all the different classrooms. Some classrooms, it was just loud, noisy, there was just a lack of management. But then this one math class with this one math teacher, same grade, same, students, he started every day with just 5 minutes of meditation. And he had his little chime and he would go ding. It was just 5 minutes of quiet before they even started their lesson. I just remember, I was like, wow, I want to be in this space. Like, because my mind was calm and, peaceful as an adult learner versus going into another classroom where it was kind of loud and, rambunctious and the kids didn't know what they were doing. So I think that those are really good strategies, and those are specifically included in your book, like a teaching tool, like here's how you do it.
Yeah, we definitely talk about that in the book for sure. And because again, back to that practical piece, right? So yes. And I love your example because you kind of help drive home and made very clear the notion that this is an extra, right? By doing through the example that you just were describing, that teacher is getting them into the learning space, right? So they're thriving because of it. It's not just this extra added, like, oh, I got to do this now. So I love that example.
Well, I was actually shadowing one of the students because he was, was for the IEP. So they had me follow him. And I was like, why is it that when he goes into this math class, he's on task and he's quiet and he's doing everything the teacher asked, but then these other teachers are having problems with this child? So I think in terms of relationship building, they weren't doing those types of skills to really, promote self-regulation and mindfulness. So you took me there. That it was probably 10 years ago, but these things do work, and they have historically worked in classrooms.
I love it. Thank you. What a great plug. Thank you. And
Patricia, we've got 3 slides left. Do we have time to go through quick examples?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we can move relatively quickly here. So here's the ISL objective. We already said we heard the academic content. You can see the identifying and analyzing metaphors, and then you have the SEL skill. So the objective as a whole might read something like this. Students are going to be able to identify and analyze metaphors and prose to identify imagery and by sharing their thoughts and feelings appropriately and working in a group to achieve the goal of evaluating at least 5 metaphors in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. So that'll be the objective. Actually, we'll walk you through briefly a quick example of what a lesson plan might look like, but that'll be our objective. So we're gonna focus on that effective collaboration piece, and then the identifying and analyzing metaphors. So then we get to the beginning, right? So part 1 is the objective. Now we get to the beginning. This is the inclusion activity. So in the inclusion activity, this is where we're looking at, like, how can we engage the students? How do we invite their voices into the room? Okay. We might ask ourselves what interpersonal skills that we can incorporate and how we can connect that to the academic content. So in this example, we may share with the students that today they're going to learn about and learn to identify and analyze imagery and poetry, right? And to do this, they're going to focus on the skill of sharing their thoughts and feelings appropriately and contributing to the achievement of a group goal. So that you can see there's that piece where we're using the SEL skill to help mitigate the content. And you'll see this play out a little bit more. So in this inclusion activity, we might do something like this. We play a video animation of, some of you may be familiar with this piece, Paul Laurence Dunbar's reading of his poem, Sympathy. It's very widely taught in schools. We could ask students to listen and then maybe give them a handout of the poem's text so they can follow along, thinking of different learning modalities, of course. And then ask them as they're following along to start to identify or think about images that Dunbar's creating there. Where is imagery being created? And then we might, after going through the reading, one way we could do this is ask students to share what they found with a partner before inviting them to share with a whole class. So there's that sort of pair share piece going on there where they're beginning that collaborative piece. So that's our hook. Now we get into the body of the lesson. This is where we want to bring in, it's not just a body, it's a body with engaging practices. So let's unpack that just a little bit. Engaging practices are definitely, engagement's the key word there. We want engagement. So what might that look like? They are present, they are present and they're participating. They have an opportunity to collaborate maybe. There are moments for creating, evaluating, reflecting, and sharing. So they are at the center for the most part, where they are engaged, right? It's not a sit and get. So, and certainly we have, I alluded to some here, but we have more in the book of what are some of those engaging practices we might be able to bring in. And again, here's where, teachers can draw on their toolboxes of engaging practices. So let's come back to the actual example of of working with imagery and metaphor. So here's where we might do a quick mini lesson on imagery and metaphor, right? No more than 15 minutes or so is what the research says, or else people start checking out. So we explain the definitions maybe and purposes, and we could share that metaphors are not only to compare unlike things, but they also create images. So we can also mention to them that references and metaphor reveal things about a speaker, right? So if a lot of my references and a metaphor are to sporting events, that probably reveals that I have some connection to sport. Maybe I was an athlete, maybe I love sports. If I have a lot of nature references, maybe I'm from a rural area, maybe I'm someone who just loves nature, but it definitely reveals something about our speaker. So after having a quick mini lesson where we kind of give them the quick down and dirty, maybe we'll do something like this. We'll give students a longer excerpt of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. We can invite the students to collaborate as a team, let's say of 3, to fill out a 3-column chart for a speech where they would have one column where they find the metaphor, one for the image that's a second column for what the image that's created, and then a third column where they start to think about what does it reveal about the speaker? So they can work on that collaboratively. I'm going to have them identify 3 to 5 metaphors, and then briefly discuss as a whole group sort of what they came up with, and in the content, and be intentional to have a discussion of what did good collaboration look like? How did it help you identify these things and make sense of these metaphors? So again, we're not just being like, hey, we talked about collaboration at the beginning, we're good. We're kind of carrying that throughout and being intentional about it and metacognitive about it. So that's what that middle piece could look like. And certainly there's a million different ways we can do it, but this is just sort of one example. And then finally, we're going to go to the end, what's known as the optimistic closure. And this is where we want to do a number of different things, right? We want to have the students reflect on what they learned, to potentially capture their thinking, and allow us potentially to formatively assess, did they get what I wanted them to get as a teacher? And then to make connections between the academic SEL content and their own lives. So going back to what Christy was talking about, like that sort of bigger meaning making that goes on. And then kind of a space to preview what's to come. So in our example, we might do an exit ticket, right? We can do this in face. We could do it virtually using something like Google Forms or Synth, which is a cool voice exit ticket you could do. And there are many others. We'll ask kids questions like, I might do an academic question like, well, what is imagery? Or what can metaphor reveal about a speaker? But then I also want to make sure I hit that SEL piece, where I might ask them a question of, well, what elements of good collaboration did your group exhibit today, or not exhibit today? And how might you be able to improve, or what really went well and where can we grow? So again, getting metacognitive about that SEL skill as well, while also getting them to think about the content. And then ultimately we would want to share, well, we've done this and here's where we're going next. So being really intentional in that closing space, instead of being like, oh, the bell rang, or oh, time to move on to literacy block, right? We're saying being intentional about saving that space for closure.
So just to clarify, you're saying also be intentional with evaluating the SEL skill. So even if I was doing a meditation at the beginning, I could ask the question like, how did you feel as a result of the morning meditation? Something like that.
How did it help you focus, or how did it,
right?
Right, exactly.
Because then you're cueing them to be aware of these SEL skills that you're explicitly teaching, rather than getting them to feel like, oh, I just jumped through another hoop,
Right, and we want it to be like, it's important stuff, right? We know this as we know this. We don't want the kids to be like, well, this is another stupid thing my teacher's making me do, right? We were hoping that they see the value in it. We're going to help them see the value of like, oh, this can help me like in life. It's not just like I'm coming to math and I got to do some stupid meditation for 5 minutes. Like, this is actually a really powerful tool I can use to help me, get calm, get focused, get centered, whatever that might be, the many things that meditation brings. But they can see that. There it goes back to like kind of going back to the perceptive teaching framework, that building capacity and developing autonomy, right, in them, that they're like, oh, this is something useful for me. Okay, that's the hope. So there's that development right of the whole person.
And it's also another way to evaluate it, right? It is to ask or to try to get at the value for them. So we can ask them questions like, so we've been meditating every day for the past week. Have you found yourself meditating at home or in other situations? Or we've been practicing communicating and being self-aware. Have you found yourself considering that in other aspects of your life or in other classes? So one way to think about evaluation isn't saying you're doing it right or wrong. It's good or bad. One way to think about evaluation is, what is of value to the person or to the people involved? That's Elliot Eisner's idea, by the way, not mine.
Yeah,
Love it.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's my idea. Well, it's been awesome having you all on the show talking, and I love that you spoke specifically about SEL, because I know it's a big buzz going on right now, and teachers are wondering like, how am I going to actually throw another thing in the mix? But as you highlighted, we're integrating it into every day so that we can support our students in their social emotional development. And I know a lot of teachers are feeling, I keep hearing, I feel like my kids have regressed. I'm teaching high school, but they feel like kindergartners. Like, what's going on? So this is really timely, you all. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show today and to speak to our future teachers and veterans out there that love what they do and how they can continue to bring that passion into teaching, learning, and planning.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. And we put up there, if you want more resources, we have them on our website. There's the site. go visit it. And, hey, reach out to us if you have questions or you want to learn some more.
Love it.
And hello to Taryn.
Yeah, Taryn says she really appreciates it. So thank you. I want to say too, like as teacher educators, we need to hear positive feedback too. When I get an email from a student saying, "Oh, Dr. D, I really appreciate you," I was like, oh, yes, I feel like I have purpose. So we all need it. So if you're in the classroom, give your colleagues a shout out. Let them know how amazing they are. Let your students know how much you appreciate them too in their effort. These are tough times and we all need to pull together. So Brad and Christy, thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom, your research, all of that, those knowledge. I love everything that you shared. And we're going to put a link to their presentation in the comments. So if you want to check this out, you want to get the book on Amazon, you'll know exactly where to go and how to get it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.